He's experienced the government regulations firsthand. Peter Schiff runs a brokerage firm. He has 150 employees. What happened to you that you were complaining to Congress about?
Regulations are running up the cost of doing business all over the country. I mean, there are a lot of companies that never even get started because they can't overcome that regulatory hurdle. Many that do get started end up going bankrupt because they can't afford the cost.
Right,
and even those that do.
You got started. You claim you would have hired 1,000 more people, but for the regulations.
I had a huge plan to expand back then. I wanted to open up a lot of offices. I had some capital to do it. I had investors lined up. My business was doing really well. But unfortunately, because of the regulations in the security industry, I was not able to hire the people at the time that I wanted to hire. In fact,
I even just hire when you want to hire?
Well, no, you could. Well, the regulators basically decide how many people you can hire and when you can hire them. I mean, there are a lot of regulations in the security industry. They cost me a fortune to comply with. I have an entire
you want to hire
department.
an analyst. You can't just hire him. You have to ask permission to hire the analyst?
Well, the analysts I could hire, but I had to get permission to publish their research, which I didn't get for years, and so I can't pay analysts if I can't sell their research. So the regulators kind of micromanage the industry, but I think they really do it for the benefit of these large firms because it really puts the brakes on the smaller firms who are trying to grow. You know, regulation is my single biggest fixed cost.
Now, they're not purposefully trying to help the big firms at the small firms' expense, but there is data showing it's cheaper for the big firms to pay for this.
Well, obviously, when you have the enormous economies of scale, you can afford to pay for all the compliance.
Now, you guys in the industry always use this jargon like guys in compliance. And to the average viewer, explain. I mean, this means you have 10 people who just try to figure out if you're obeying the rules.
Right. The securities regulators basically set up all these rules, all these I's you have to dot and T's that you have to cross. Otherwise, they'll shut you down if you don't do it. And so you have to spend all the money and all the time to comply with all these rules and regulations.
So 10 people are just nerdily doing their tiny...
Yeah, and things take forever to do. You can't just act very quickly because everything has to be done through this maze of compliance. People are complying with regulations instead of producing, instead of investing in growing the economy. They're trying to survive the regulators.
And this that you're talking about was all true before Dodd-Frank, which is this here, by the way, this 850-page bill. And this is just the bill. The real regulations are still being written.
Oh, yeah, the regulations have been piled on year after year. You know, they never repeal the old regulations. They just add new ones. I mean, a lot of the stuff that cost me the most had to do with the anti-money laundering stuff that came out of the Patriot Act. But, you know, I've been struggling with regulations.
You moved some jobs offshore because of the...
I started a whole brokerage firm and bank in the Caribbean so that I can service my international clients because it's too expensive to do it here.
But these regulations are passed for a reason. And the president said about Dodd-Frank, this reform will put a stop to the bad loans that fueled the debt-based bubble.
Not at all. In fact, the bad loans were fueled by the Federal Reserve. They were fueled by Freddie and Fannie, by government-guaranteed bank accounts.
Well, this will stop it. This will stop all.
It's not going to stop it at all. It's going to make it worse. And, you know, the worst regulations, I think, that Congress writes are the ones that specifically punish you for hiring people. Because in America today, the minute you hire somebody, the minute you become an employer, you basically lose all your rights. And so the government has made it very dangerous in America to hire somebody. So most small business owners go out of their way to avoid hiring people because they don't want the legal liability.
Because you can never fire them, or it's too hard to fire them.
Well, if you fire them, they can sue you for any one of a dozen reasons. They can sue you frivolously. You know, if employees can quit for whatever reason they want, and they can, employers should be able to fire for whatever reason they want.
They also want to make it illegal to not hire someone because they're unemployed, and we'll cover that later in the show.
Then no one's going to interview anybody who's unemployed for a long period of time because they're afraid they'll get sued if they don't hire them.
Let's go to the new Obama jobs plan. Stimulus must do some good.
No, it's not going to stimulate the economy. It's going to stimulate government. It's going to stimulate more debt and more consumption. The only thing that's really going to stimulate the economy is to shrink the burden that government places on it. What we need is to produce our way out of this gigantic hole that bad monetary and fiscal policy have left us in. But simply borrowing more money and spending it is not the solution. That's part of the problem.
Most Americans think it is. A higher percentage of people think the jobs plan is a good plan than not.
Well, because they don't understand economics. If somebody took the time to explain it to them, they would